Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into some fascinating recent research to unpack that heavy digital pressure we literally all face. But more importantly, we're going to discover some genuinely actionable ways to reclaim our attention. We'll explore the psychology behind why we feel totally chained to our feeds, the real-world impact that has on our personal growth, and exactly how we can finally break free.
So, let's start by holding a metaphorical mirror up to our screens and asking a pretty tough question. Are you actually living your life, or are you just performing it for an audience? It's a seriously crucial thing to ask ourselves right now, because our social media habits might be profoundly impacting our day-to-day reality without us even realizing it's happening.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover the social media trap, the psychology of FOMO, the risks of oversharing, rethinking personal growth, practicing digital minimalism, and lastly, moving from FOMO to JOMO.
Section 1. The social media trap. Permanently online, permanently connected.
Okay, let's dive right in by looking at the wild environment we operate in today. With the rapid spread of the mobile internet, the world has effectively turned into this massive global village. We are always plugged in. But here's the catch. When we're permanently connected, our subjective perception gets absolutely flooded by excessive outside information. Researchers actually call this perceptual overload. Basically, your brain is constantly trying to process this endless fire hose of updates, news, and notifications. And you know what? It creates an incredibly heavy mental burden that you're just carrying around in your pocket all day long.
Section 2. The psychology of FOMO, the anxiety of the feed. Now, all that perceptual overload we just talked about, it breeds a very specific, highly documented, modern psychological state. Yep, the fear of missing out, or FOMO. It's this diffuse, nagging form of anxiety. It's that creeping concern that other people are out there having these amazing, novel experiences or positive events, and you're just not. It really kicks in when we don't get timely feedback from our digital networks. We start feeling a bit isolated, so what do? We constantly refresh our feeds, desperately trying to update our information to make up for that perceived lack of connection.
So what's actually driving this? Well, communication studies point to three main triggers for this anxiety. First, self-presentation. Sociologist Irving Goffman called this dramaturgy theory. Essentially, we treat social media like a literal stage, constantly managing our performance. Second, as we just discussed, is that perceptual overload from endless digital updates. And third, upward social comparison. We open up these platforms and, inevitably, we compare our messy, unedited, behind-the-scenes reality to the magnified, highly curated good parts of everyone else's lives. No wonder we're stressed, right?
The ultimate consequence of this whole habitual cycle is severe social media fatigue. And we're not just talking about needing a nap here. It's a psychological state characterized by profound mental exhaustion, intense boredom, and this really strong, lingering desire to just quit the platforms altogether. But here's the kicker. The mental anxiety of FOMO just accumulates, which ironically motivates us to frequently and repeatedly use the apps again, throwing us right back into that exhausting cycle.
Moving on to Section 3, the risks of oversharing. Seeking validation on the digital stage.
Driven by all that anxiety and this deep desire to perform, we so often fall right into the trap of oversharing. As Rosmini Agoa Salim, a prominent psychologist from the University of Indonesia, points out, people often overshare without even realizing they're doing it. Why? Well, because of that quick, fleeting sense of pleasure we get from audience likes and comments. That validation feels really good in the moment. However, oversharing can actually have some pretty negative consequences. It can severely impact your real-life personal relationships, mainly because not everyone in your network is necessarily going to accept, understand, or agree with your deeply personal disclosures. Which brings us to Section 4, Rethinking Personal Growth, the Science of Self-Regard. So the absolutely crucial point here is figuring out how exactly we can break out of this digital validation trap. To do that, we really need to look at academic frameworks for true personal development. Take this fascinating 2024 academic study from the University of Mississippi. It dives deep into the specific self-relevant pathways that actually predict whether someone will achieve meaningful personal growth, as opposed to just, chasing digital likes.
The study reveals a fascinating and honestly somewhat surprising nuance. It compared two very different concepts, positive self-regard and unconditional self-regard. Get this. Having positive self-regard, which is an optimistic, healthy evaluation of yourself, positively predicts personal growth. It frees you from self-doubt so you can actually pursue your goals. But on the flip side, having unconditional self-regard, meaning a rigid, unchanging view of yourself regardless of the circumstances, actually negatively predicts growth. If you walk around believing you are completely flawless exactly as you are and refuse to change, it literally leads to stagnation. It shows a total reluctance to reflect on mistakes, which is exactly the kind of rigid echo chamber mindset that social media can sometimes encourage.
Section 5. Practicing digital minimalism, an antidote to digital stagnation. To avoid that exact stagnation and to finally break the cycle of social media fatigue we discussed earlier, we can turn to author Cal Newport's brilliant philosophy of digital minimalism. See, a simple digital detox is often just a short-term band-aid. You step away for a weekend, you temporarily escape the overload, but then, boom, you slip right back into those old habits on Monday. Digital minimalism, on the other hand, is a fundamental, long-lasting approach. Its entire focus is on rebuilding your digital habits from the ground up so they actually support an intentional life.
Let's break down the core principles here. First off, you have to start with what matters most to you, your core values. Second, you do more with less. Think quality over quantity. Instead of spreading your attention super thin across 10 different apps, you pick the 2 that actually bring real value to your life. And third, you intentionally make time for solitude and meaningful leisure. These principles dictate a totally new rule. Technology must literally earn its place on your phone by serving your values. It encourages you to replace all that mindless, anxious scrolling with deep reflection and real-life connections.
So how do you actually start? Well, you do it through a structured 30-day digital declutter. Step 1. Step away from all optional technologies for a full month. Just cut the cord. Step 2. Use that newfound time to reflect on your core values and figure out what you actually enjoy doing offline. Step 3. Intentionally reintroduce those digital tools, but with super strict rules, like maybe you only check social media on a desktop computer, for example. This 30-day process acts like a massive reset button, giving your brain the breathing room it needs to rewire itself entirely away from the social media trap.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, From FOMO to JOMO, the joy of missing out.
Ultimately, completing a declutter like that brings us to a dramatically healthier state of mind. We transition away from that exhausting fear of missing out, and we start fully embracing JOMO, the joy of missing out. JOMO is this incredibly empowering mindset where you actively choose not to participate in certain activities or social media trends. You suddenly realize you don't need to be involved in everything. You aren't missing out. You are intentionally retreating from the digital noise to focus on your real-life well-being and finding genuine peace in the present moment. And to actually maintain this newfound joy, we need to lean heavily into some essential human virtues. Bringing it back to the University of Indonesia psychologist we quoted earlier, the ultimate keys to mastering our digital habits are empathy and self-control. Empathy helps us step back and consider how our digital actions actually impact others. And self-control? That's the muscle we use to restrain that anxious urge to endlessly scroll or publicly overshare everything. At the end of the day, we absolutely have to master these tools, rather than letting the tools master us.
I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Are you ready to find your joy of missing out? Just think about the sheer amount of mental space you could clear up. What amazing things might you discover about yourself, your forgotten hobbies, and your real-life relationships if you simply gave yourself permission to log off? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Take a moment today to put down the screen, look around, and truly embrace the joy of the present.